Veliko nam je zadovoljstvo predstaviti prvog pozvanog predavača na ovogodišnjoj konferenciji. Profesor Wim van Petegem dolazi iz belgijskog Levena i profesor je na Fakultetu inženjerske tehnologije na Katoličkom sveučilištu Leuven. Njegovi znanstveni interesi obuhvaćaju tehnologije učenja, oblikovanje nastave, inženjersko obrazovanje, visoko fleksibilno high-flex učenje i digitalno učenje. Profesor Wim van Petegem govorit će o razvoju digitalnog znanstvenika, poučavanju, istraživanju u digitalnom svijetu, te kako postati digitalno vješt u ulozi učitelja, istraživača ili akademskog voditelja. It is our honor to present our first keynote speaker. Wim van Petegem is a professor at Catholic University Leuven in Belgium, one of the most prestigious universities in Europe. His research interests are in learning technologies, instructional design, engineering education, high-flex learning, and digital scholarship. He's actively involved in different international networks of universities and gives regular training sessions on innovation in education and digital competences for teachers and professional support staff. Many of us here in Croatia have a long history of fruitful cooperation with Professor Van Petegem on a number of international projects and initiatives in field of e-learning. Please give Professor Van Petegem a warm welcome.
Good morning, and thank you for the introduction and the invitation to be here today and be your keynote speaker. I apologize, my Croatian is not that good, so I will continue in English. The topic that I would like to talk about today is evolving as a digital scholar. I will immediately say, together with colleagues from the University of Stellenbosch in South Africa, we published a book about this topic, and I will announce that at the end of my talk, so you don't have to take notes. Okay, when we talk about digital scholars, I would like to take, first of all, a while to explain what do we mean by a scholar. I explicitly do not use the word academic here or professor, because I think there is many more people involved in the university when it comes to teaching and learning. And let's call them scholars in general. Scholars have been defined by Ernest Boyer already a long time ago, people that are interested in these four topics. And you will recognize let's say, the main aspects of a university nowadays, and that is related to teaching and learning, research, and community service. Boyer said that an academic or a scholar should be involved in discovery, which is exploring things, researching things, integration these new findings in what you already know, and apply that new knowledge in new situations. That is actually the reason why we are doing this research. And while you're doing that, you don't want to keep it for yourself, you want to share it with the rest of the world, and that means that you are also involved in teaching. Okay, that's a scholar. But when it comes to a digital scholar, I refer to the book written by Martin Weller from the Open University in the UK, and he added a couple of things that are more related to the digital aspects. And he says a digital scholar is someone who employs digital, networked, and open approaches to demonstrate a specialism in the field. Of course, we are talking about the digital world, online world, technology-enhanced teaching and learning, so the digital is prominently in the definition. But it's more than just digital. It's also networked. It means that we are no longer in our, let's say, own campus, own university, in our own country. We are networked with the rest of the world. And as a digital scholar, you need to find your position in that network. And it can only be successful if you have an open mind, if you are engaged in not just keeping it for yourself, but openly share what you know, what you are doing, trying to connect with the rest of the world. Okay, so that is what Martin Weller says about a digital scholar. So when it then comes to teaching and learning in the new digital world, this is a picture that illustrates a little bit the transformation we have to go through from a typical classroom setting where there is a teacher in front of the audience, of the students, transferring knowledge to the rest of the classroom, what I'm doing right now actually, towards something which is more illustrated by the picture at the right hand here. And that is, learning is happening at all places in different forms, by talking to people, talking to your peers, talking to experts, being networked and open. Remember what Martin Weller said. So there is a lot more ways of teaching and learning happening than the typical picture at the left-hand side here. So we need to adapt and to try to find a way to get from the left-hand side to the right-hand side of this picture. And that's what I would like to share with you in the rest of my time here. Does that mean that we, as professors or academics or scholars, do we simply have to assume that our students, our audience, has changed and that they have been adapted to the digital world, to the online world, and the technology that we are all aware of? Or do we have to change as teachers and simply assume that our students are still there, sitting in the room, like we are used to when we were students, young students? I think it's a bit of both. And we have to combine the two worlds together into one new world, let's say. And that's what I like, the combination of good things from the past and the good things of the future into one, call it learning environment, whatever. I think it's a new world that we have to discover, to explore, to integrate in what we know, and so on. Okay? Just to further set the scene, I think that our learners, our students, needless to say, they have changed a lot. If I remember when I was a student, long time ago, at the end of my studies, I remember that at the university where I graduated, there was a PC room, and it was 20 computers there, desktop computers, behind locked doors, and you could only enter when the teacher said that you were allowed to do there some exercises. There was no internet, of course. If you look now at our students nowadays, and you tell that there was a world without internet, they can hardly believe you. They can hardly imagine what that would mean, a world without internet. So we are talking about Generation Z here. That is the generation, well, you remember that there is a lot told about the baby boomers and then Generation X, Y, and we are now at Generation Z, Generation Z. That's the generation that is coming now to our university. It's people that have been born in a world where it was obvious that you had internet, that there was Wi-Fi, that you had smartphones, and that world, they bring that with them when they come to the university. It's the world in which they live, it's the world in which they work, it's the world in which they learn. And they expect us to create an environment at campus, at the university, that sort of embraces that world, that is becoming one world with the world that of the students where they what they are used to. Okay, so that is what well, you can find literature about the characteristics of Generation Z. I don't want to go into detail here, my time is running, but I invite you to have a look at, and at least to try to understand the characteristics of the newer generation of students coming to the university. And it's not just the students coming to the university with these characteristics. When they graduate, the labor market is also expecting students with new sort of competences. The new skills of the future skills that our employers expect from our graduates are linked to that digital world, to the online world. And so it's also for us then as teachers, as scholars, to help these students when they enter the university with their competences, to bring them to a level with competences that the labor market is asking from them. Okay, so we also have to keep that in mind. It's not just our students with their competences entering the university, it's also what the society is actually expecting from our graduates. Okay, and then it comes, how do we as teachers, as scholars, as academics, have to help these students to grow in these new competences? Well, I would like to share a few models and frameworks with you here. And the first one I would like to show here is the Summer model. Some of you might have heard about it. It is a model that explains a little bit what is expected from us as teachers, as scholars. Yeah, if we enter that digital world. And the lowest level, the first thing we could do is simply substitute things from the online, from the face-to-face world, from the old-fashioned way of teaching into digital resources, into a digital world. Simply substitute. The next level is augmentation, which means that we enrich the environment thanks to the digital technology. So we still do what we are used to. We keep the good things from the past and we add new things there. Modification means that we are already redesigning our teaching and learning because of the affordances of the technology that we have nowadays, things that were not possible when we were teaching in a face-to-face situation in the traditional way. So for instance, introducing a poll in the classroom, well, you could think that this is a substitute, but you could also say that you modify the way that you're teaching because now you get immediate feedback from your students, personalized or not. Okay. The ultimate goal is redefinition of the teaching and learning. And I've heard, well, I didn't understand the Croatian too well, but I've heard it a couple of times saying this morning already, digital transformation is important. And that is exactly where we are heading to. We really have to think about our teaching and learning in the universities in a completely new way. And that is digital first, sometimes digital only. And that is what my university at least is trying to do. Not digital only, but certainly digitally first. Okay, that is transformation, digital transformation, the ultimate goal of what we are trying to achieve nowadays. Okay, but that is in general. If you now look at yourself as a teacher, as a scholar, as an academic, I would like to introduce to you the TPACK model. Some of you might have heard about it. It's a combination of different competences, knowledges that you need to have as a teacher nowadays. First of all, you're the expert in your topic. You're the contents expert, right? And that is why you're teaching this course. Next to that, you also need to know about the didactics, the pedagogical aspects. If you're a biologist, then you need to know what are proper formats of bringing a biology course to my students. And that's totally different from history or engineering courses, right? Okay, so you need to know the contents, you need to know the pedagogical aspects, and nowadays comes also the technology knowledge as an important aspect into the picture. And that means that you also need to know, giving my contents, giving the fact that I know how to bring that to my students, I also need to know how can I support my story with the technology that is available nowadays, the digital technology that is available nowadays. Bringing these together, that is then the holy grail, finding the spot in the middle of that picture. Okay, that is what we expect from a digital scholar. One model. Don't forget that there is also an outer circle here in the picture, which says that there is a context in which we have to work. And the context here in Croatia might be different from the context in Leuven, might be different from a context in Africa or Latin America. Okay, so we always need to think about the context as an important factor when we think about where is that holy grail there in the middle of the picture. That's a TPACK model. I will skip this slide. I would just like, excuse me, to introduce this model here. It's made by Jisc, which is an organization in the UK. And they talk about digital capability of individuals, but also of organizations. And they talk about ICT proficiency. If you want to survive, let's say, as a teacher in that new digital world, you need to be ICT proficient. And that is then boils down to 4 aspects here. I don't have the time to elaborate them all, but it's about literacy, knowing about the technology, the information, and being able to analyze and to interpret these things. It's about digital creation. Yeah, we also need to be able to produce slides like this, or maybe even more. And I was talking about a poll in your lecture. You need to know how to do that. You need to be creative. You need to know how to make these things. Remember what Martin Weller said. He talked about networked aspects of your digital scholarship. We also need to think about how we could communicate in the digital world. It's not just by email. Actually, when I'm still using email to communicate with my students, but I have to recognize that this is not their favorite communication tool anymore. Although it's still the top-down decision by my university that official communication should be done by email, I know that my students are communicating in a different way. And I have to think about, okay, that official aspect is there, but if I want to get my students do something, I probably need to think about another communication channel with them. And not just with my students, also with my peers. There is a lot of possible tools that you could use to communicate, and you need to find a way how to integrate all these communication channels in your daily work. And then the 4th circle here is about digital learning and development. We all know that lifelong learning is an important aspect of our life as a scholar, as an academic. But we also need to know how to learn in that digital world, how to learn about the digital tools, but also how to learn with these digital tools. And that is, if you do that yourself as a teacher, you will probably also be able to transfer that experience towards your students. Okay? And again, all these 4 circles together lead to ICT proficiency. There is also in this picture an outer circle here, and that is getting more and more important. And we have seen that in the COVID times, that digital identity and especially digital well-being of the students are an important aspect that we have to keep in mind. Yeah. So we also, it's not just enough to focus on the technology, how to use the technology in a proper way and so on. We also need to think about the well-being of ourselves, but also of our students. And I think that this is an important aspect we should not forget. Okay, also the European Commission has developed a framework that could be helpful to think about your own competences as a digital scholar, and it's called Digital Competence Framework for Educators. You will recognize things that I already said. The core part in this picture is in the middle, of course, and that is what kind of competences do you need as a teacher when you're in front of a classroom or with students working online maybe. And there is 4 aspects there in that educator's pedagogical competence part here. You need to know the digital resources, the tools, how to make them, how to select them maybe if you do not want to reinvent the wheel. So that is one part of your digital competence. You need to know how to use them for teaching and learning. Remember the TPAC model. You also need to know, and that is an extra here that I would like to emphasize, you also need to be able to evaluate your students in that digital world. Does that mean that we have to go to fully online assessment of students? No, that I'm not saying. But does it mean that it's still okay to only have like written exams on paper with the students? I don't think that this is probably the right way that we need to go. We also need to find for evaluation, for assessment, somewhere a way in the middle between these two. And again, that demands extra competences of us as scholars, how to set up a proper assessment in such a combined world. And number 5 there on the picture, empowering learners, that refers back to what I just said with Jisc, the digital well-being. We need to empower our students. We need to be able to get our students feeling comfortable in what we are doing in the digital world. Okay, so we also need to bring the students in that combined physical and online world together, make sure that they enjoy it, that they have a learning experience that they will never forget. Okay, that is the core of the framework here. You see that there is at the left-hand side something that is referring to you as a teacher. To be able to do all these things there in the middle, you also need to think about your own professional competences. You need to grow as a teacher in that digital world. So you need to be able to find out where are the gaps in my own knowledge, in my own competence, and how can I then grow in that aspect. The right-hand side, it's the same, but then for students. Remember that I said that our students come with their background of a digital world, and they need to grow so that they have the competences that are demanded by society. That is then illustrated there at the right-hand side of this framework. So we need to help our students to grow in digital competences. If they enter the university and they know how to share TikTok films or whatever, that they may also end up with being able to assess for themselves what the potential is of these tools for their own lifelong learning. Okay, I will skip this one. This is just illustrating that you can grow in these different levels of competences. And that is something that you could use a metaphor, learning to swim. It's growing. It's you start with just putting your toe in the water, and you just try out a little bit, and then you jump in the water, you start swimming, and finally you become a trainer for new swimmers. Okay, I would like to illustrate this framework, and that is the framework that we used in the book that I already mentioned. And it's a digital scholar framework with 3 dimensions. The outer dimension is clear, I think, and that is what we all are familiar with. As a teacher, an academic, scholar, we engage in teaching and learning, in research and community service. And these things are, well, they are always circling around what we are doing. They are always there as our, let's say, reason of existence as an academic. Okay. The second dimension is illustrated by the blue circles. And that is you as an individual, you're there somewhere in the middle, yourself. You need to think about what is my position here in that new combined online physical world. Where do I want to stand? And just a question to illustrate that point, do you want your Facebook account be shared for private and professional use? Or do you want split personalities there in Facebook? Or do you don't want to use Facebook at all, nor for private, nor for professional reasons? Yeah, you need to think about your position in that broader picture. And it all starts from there. How do I feel in that digital world, and how do I would like to be represented in that digital world? But you're not alone. You're not just on yourself. You're a member of a team. It could be that you are a member of a co-teaching team. It could be that you are head of a research group. There are different ways that we are connected to a team. And so we also need to know how we work together in a team, how we collaborate, how we share things in a team. Our close friends, so to say, the closest circle of with whom we are working together. But your team is not alone. Your team is part of a bigger institution. There must be somewhere in the university or the department or the faculty, it depends what you consider as your institution. There should be a sort of policy. There should be a sort of strategy towards the technology that is needed. You need to have a sort of context in which you could work. And that institution should also think about itself as, where do we want to be in that digital world? For instance, my university, we do have a strategy which is called Going Digital. And that's part of the university strategy. Okay? But your institution is not an ivory tower. It is linked to society. So you also need to think about what is our position as an institution in the society in which we are living and working and teaching and learning. Okay? And what is the society demanding from us? We all get, well, not all, but in many cases, we get public money for doing what we are doing at the university. Okay, so we also have a responsibility towards the society. Remember what I said, society demands certain competences of our students. And we have to link what we are doing towards what society is asking. Okay, and then I mentioned that we are networked nowadays with the whole world. The outer circle, blue circle here, is then the global world. Our society is not just living on its own. We are part of the global world. We are connected with the rest of the world. So how can we connect what we are doing here with what is happening in the US or in Latin America or in Africa or whatever? Okay. So starting from yourself towards the global world. That is what is illustrated in these blue circles, the second dimension of this framework. The third dimension in the framework is then illustrated by the pie chart, the 5 pieces of the cake. And there are 5 roles that you could play as a teacher or a scholar. I would say starting from author to networker, but there is no linear order in it. There is different roles, and there is a sort of complexity growing from one to another. But you could simply jump around from one role into another. It's not that you have to do them as a sequence, but I will illustrate the point, and that will make it clear. An author is someone who uses words, and we're all used to that. As an academic, we are supposed to do research and to publish our research in scientific papers, which is words on paper that you then put in the library. Okay, but it's expected from us. We need to be able to do that, also in the digital world. Okay, we use the digital tools to produce our scientific papers. In the digital world, we might also be engaged in, for instance, blogs, and share our knowledge in a blog with a larger audience. Okay. Storyteller goes one step further, and it's someone who is not just putting words on paper, but it's someone who is able to also bring that story to a larger audience. And that might be in the digital world with maybe podcasts, which is quite popular nowadays. Okay, so it adds an extra dimension, an extra medium in the picture, and that is audio. Okay, if you also add video, then you can play the role as a creator. You're producing fully digital learning materials, video material, that could be web lectures, could be whatever. So you are creating a story supported by the proper media. Okay. One step further is integrating that. You're not just creating that learning resource, but you could also integrate that in the learning environment in such a way that it becomes natural for students to recognize that this is something that relates to maybe a paper, that relates to an exercise, that relates to a lab session, or whatever. You're able to integrate the media in a learning experience for your students. And then the ultimate role here is the networker. You're not just doing that with your own students, but you're able to share that with a larger audience, to network what you're doing with your students to a larger community, let's say. And that could be society, that could be the rest of the world. That could also be that you bring in someone from the outside, from the international community, into your classroom. Okay, so starting from someone who is just able to bring to write a story on paper, to someone who is actually sharing all these nice things with a larger community in an online world, that are the different roles illustrated in the pie chart. Being a digital scholar means that you are able to identify in that framework, where do I want to go? What is my role? What is my relation to the others? And where do I put my focus on with regard to the classical academic activities? Okay, if you then want to grow as a digital scholar, I have some advices for you, and I would like to share them here. The first one is being agile. And agile could mean two things. Maybe some of you know Bloom's taxonomy for getting higher order thinking skills. Bloom said that already in the 60s, 70s, and he has like 6 levels of thinking skills, starting from just know things, being able to understand, to apply, to analyze, to synthesize, and ultimately to evaluate. Bloom did that with substantives, but his PhD students thought it's better to do that with active verbs, active and agile. Yeah. So they analyzed what Bloom said, and they translated that into active verbs. And nowadays, we are talking about Bloom's digital taxonomy. And there we translated these active verbs towards active verbs that are a bit more adapted to the digital world in which we are living and learning. Okay, and there you will see that there is one extra level. We are now talking about 7 levels of thinking skills. And the ultimate level is sharing. And that is the open mind, the networked world in which we are living. Okay, so being agile is being able to use these active verbs when it comes to thinking about our thinking skills, not just for our students, but also for ourselves. Being agile also reflects something which is known in the software, in the project world, where we came from waterfall models of software development to spiral models and so on. Nowadays, we are using agile methods to develop software, which means that we are much more flexible and that we are much more listening to our customer to develop a project with specifications that are met at the end of the project, much more than when we do it in a linear way like we did in the past. Same is a bit true for instructional design, for what we are doing as a teacher when we are developing our course. Okay, probably you might have heard about the ADI instructional model, which is a very linear, straightforward model of developing courses or learning activities, starting from an analysis of the situation, designing what you want to do with the course, developing the course and learning materials and learning activities, implementing what you have prepared, and then evaluate what you did and trying to see, okay, how can we then go back in the circle and do the work year after year from edition of the course to another edition. That's a very linear, straightforward way of thinking about instructional design. Still valid. And there are variations where you make shortcuts and so on, and there are feedback loops in it. But what I would like to say is that also in our instructional design process, we could be a bit more agile, meaning that we could listen a bit more to what our students do or want us to do. We could use the students as co-creators in the process. We could use the students as real partners in the teaching and learning experience that we would like to share with them. And that is what I think in the digital world, being a digital scholar is a very important aspect, a very important competence. I'm learning a lot from my students. I hope that they also learn a lot from me, but that's something else. Okay. The second advice I would like to give is watch the trends. And you could do that yourself, being a trend watcher and seeing all kinds of technologies popping up. And then all of a sudden you realize, oh my God, what kind of tool do I now need to use? Because if I try to understand this tool now, tomorrow it will be already outdated. And there is such a huge number of tools, a huge amount of tools. Where do I find then the tool that fits my purpose? Well, you could look at what the other people already have been doing when it comes to trend setting. Gartner's hype cycle, I think I have to skip this because of the time, but it might be inspirational. There might be a sort of hype when a new tool comes up, then it falls down because not all the expectations are met, and it needs to grow a little bit higher again and reach a sort of plateau where we see, okay, this is now a well-established technology. You could do that for e-learning technology. But what I would like to say is that there are many reports that you could consult when it comes to trends in learning technologies in digital teaching and learning. One of them is the EDUCAUSE Horizon report, which starts from a technology and starts from scenarios where technology is used in teaching and learning. And they give you the trends for a couple of years in the future. And they also give you pointers of what are enablers for introducing these trends into your situation, but also what are barriers that you have to take. I just invite you to go and have a look at their annual reports. I think it's an interesting resource, inspirational also for digital scholars. And the second report I would like to mention is the Innovating Pedagogy report that is produced by the Open University in the UK every year. And they start from pedagogical scenarios rather than from the technology. So they think about, okay, what is the new way of teaching and learning tomorrow? And they try to then explain, okay, and how can technology then be used, the current technologies, that digital technologies, to enable, to facilitate, to support these pedagogical scenarios. Just two reports that I can recommend because it's not just guts feeling in these reports, it's also based on a sort of scientific research process they are doing. Engage in action research. What do I mean by that? It's a bit related to what I said in the ADI model, evaluate yourself. If you're implementing new ways of teaching and learning, if you're doing your work as a digital scholar, it also means that you constantly think, am I right? Am I doing the right things now? Hey, am I having impact on what my students are learning? Is it possible to measure what I'm doing actually, the effectiveness and the efficiency of what I'm doing? And that you can do while you are actually implementing your new ways of teaching. And with the help of your students. And that is something that we more need to do than not just doing our research in the topic in which we are experts, but also about our own practice as a teacher, as an academic, as a scholar. And being involved in action research, I think, well, I like it myself. Educational research is becoming more and more important. You can even publish papers in that area. Lead to change. I think that is the last advice I would like to give. There is that curve that we all know. We have the early adopters when a new technology pops up, but we also have the lazy laggards at the end of the tail at the other side. And it's up to you to decide where in that curve you would like to be. Honestly, I myself, I'm more in that early majority there. I'm not an early adapter. I'm not buying the newest tool whenever something new pops up. I'm waiting a little bit and wanting to see, okay, is it necessary? Will it improve what I'm doing? But I don't want to be at the right-hand side there of the picture. And so as a digital scholar, it's up to you to decide where in that picture you would like to be. And we will always have in an institution people that are at the left-hand side. Fortunately, they are trying out new things and we can learn from them. And when we've learned good things, then we can use these experiences for ourselves as well. There is another metaphor here. I will skip it because of the time. We should also, while we are leading the change, not forget that not all our colleagues are even interested in doing these new things than we are interested in. And sometimes it's also good to just sit back and look at what we are doing, and is this the right way to do, or should we maybe just take a step back and go back to what we are used to. Not all innovations are successful, and we simply have to admit that and learn from these experiences. Okay, I think my time is running, so I would like to end with just this slide here, and it's my plea for go digital. And digital, well, you could use it as an acronym, and I've put here a lot of active verbs, Bloom's digital taxonomy in mind. Just do it, okay? And then the advertisement. This is the book that I was talking about, Evolving as a Digital Scholar. You could download it. It's an open access book, so it's freely available as a PDF document. If you got inspired by what I just said, I can recommend you to download this book. And that will end my presentation. Thank you very much for your attention. Okay.
Naravno, hvala profesoru Wimu van Petegenu. Thank you, professor. And now, time for questions from people that are present here. Are there any questions? Pitanja?
Or was it clear what I said?
One question, pitanje?
Well, I have to ask you something, Wim, because we are coming from the same field of education and we are trying to be digital. But I think you will agree with me that today it's very hard to be digital. How would you comment the necessity of being an academic, being a researcher, and also at the same time to be aware of the green thing, you know, to be aware of the digital transformation, to be aware of well-being and lots of things. So how to combine that, and do you have some recommendation how to be a good scholar?
Thank you, Sandra, for your question. It's a very general question, I think. And in a way, it's my story, actually. You, as a digital scholar, you have to recognize that we are living in a new world. And step by step, you have to learn what that new world means for you as an academic. I know that also in my institution, we have to recognize that the most important thing when you want to get promoted, that is that you are good in research. And that this might be the main focus of what you're doing. And I agree that this is something we cannot deny. If I look at my own career, it is important that you have your publications, that you are involved in networks, that you that you have your projects and get funding, and that you have PhD students and all these kind of things. But what I also said in my talk is that you could also publish about your educational research. And actually in my university, more and more, the teaching aspect of you as an academic is becoming important. And that means that you have to produce a teaching portfolio when you want to get promoted, that you have to illustrate what you do to improve your teaching and to improve the learning experiences of your students, so that there is much more attention paid to these aspects than it used to be in the past. So there is shared responsibilities here, I think. You as an individual, as an academic, you need to realize that your position is different from what it was in the past. But you should also have an institution that is recognizing that and that is then top-down making decisions. Like I said, the strategy on going digital, what I just illustrated, the procedures for getting promotion should be adapted so that there is indeed room for all these things. remember that I said in the frameworks that the context in which we are working is important. And that applies to our students, yes, but it also applies to us as teachers. And yeah, to a certain extent, you can create these conditions yourself and to explore the context. But at the other hand, we also have to admit that we need the boundary conditions set by an institution or an organization that is helping you in that. I don't know if this helps
Well, thank you. Yes, I agree. But basically, your answer is that we should be Superman, like in the end, because it's very challenging to adapt to all new things we require. Yeah. I think that we also have to change the culture of an environment and where we work, because we can do it ourselves. But if an environment doesn't change, that it also influences the thing. Thank you.
To a certain extent, I agree, being a Superman or women. But I also said that it might be, I can, well, two things. You can learn a lot from your students as well. So I'm not considering myself as a Superman, but I love to work together with my students. And so being able to communicate with them in a way that is appealing and that, that we could create things much better than what I would do only by myself. That makes me happy, let's say. But I agree, if you really want to do that, you need a lot of competences. And if you want to call that a Superman, okay.
Is that all? Je li to sve s pitanjima? If that's all, thank you very much, professor. Još jednom hvala profesoru Wimu van Petegenu. Hvala.